They look at you and pretend they don't see it. They laugh, dismiss you, underestimate you because accepting your true power would force them to question everything they believe about themselves. The funny thing, you don't even realize what you're carrying inside. While you've been doubting your worth, others have been quietly watching, calculating, even fearing the day you finally wake up. The moment you recognize your own strength, the game changes forever. Masks begin to fall. Fake allies disappear. Those who once controlled the room suddenly become nervous. Because the greatest threat isn't a loud person, it's someone who finally discovers how unstoppable they truly are. Most people spend years searching for power in the wrong places. They chase status, approval, money, or recognition, believing that one day something outside of them will finally make them feel complete. They convince themselves that confidence is something they have to earn, that strength belongs only to those who were born gifted, lucky, or fearless. But that's the greatest illusion you'll ever be sold. The truth is far stranger. Real power isn't something you acquire. It's something you've been carrying all along, hidden beneath layers of fear, doubt, disappointment, and conditioning. You were never empty. You were simply distracted from what already existed inside you. From the moment you entered this world, people began telling you who you should become. They handed you labels before you had the chance to discover your own identity. They rewarded obedience more than originality. They praised you when you fit into expectations and questioned you whenever you dared to think differently. Slowly, without realizing it, you started measuring your worth through other people's opinions. Every criticism became a brick. Every rejection became another wall. Every failure became another reason to believe you weren't enough. Over time, those walls grew so high that you forgot there was something powerful waiting behind them. The strange part is that your strength never disappeared. It simply became quieter. It waited patiently beneath every setback, every sleepless night, every moment you questioned yourself. It watched while you underestimated your own abilities. It remained untouched while your confidence rose and fell, depending on circumstances. Just because you couldn't feel your power didn't mean it was gone. Fire doesn't stop existing because it's buried beneath ashes. It only waits for the right spark. Think about every difficult season you've already survived. At the time, you probably believed it would break you. You wondered how you would ever recover. Yet somehow, here you are, breathing, learning, growing. The version of you standing today is built from thousands of moments where giving up would have been easier than moving forward. You may not celebrate those moments because they seemed ordinary, but ordinary resilience creates extraordinary people. Every challenge quietly strengthened muscles you never knew you possessed. One reason people fail to recognize their own power is because they become too familiar with themselves. You see your fears every day, you know your mistakes, your regrets, your weaknesses, and every insecurity you've tried to hide. Others only see the results. They see someone who kept going when most would have quit. They see calm during pressure. They see determination after disappointment. They notice qualities that you've dismissed because they've become normal to you. What feels ordinary from the inside often appears remarkable from the outside. There is another trap that keeps people disconnected from their strength. They mistake comfort for safety. Staying small feels predictable. Playing invisible reduces criticism. Blending into the crowd means fewer risks and fewer chances of failure. But comfort slowly becomes a prison. Every day you avoid your potential, that invisible cage grows stronger. The bars aren't made of steel. They're built from excuses. Maybe later, I'm not ready. Someone else could do it better. These thoughts sound harmless until they become the script that controls your entire life. Power begins revealing itself the moment you challenge those thoughts instead of obeying them. The first step isn't dramatic. It rarely feels heroic. It's choosing to speak when fear tells you to stay silent. It's taking action before confidence arrives. It's trusting your ability to adapt instead of waiting for certainty. Every small act of courage sends a message to your mind that you're capable of more than you believed yesterday. Confidence isn't born before action. It's created because of action. Many people believe powerful individuals never experience fear. That's another illusion. Fear visits everyone. The difference is that strong people stop treating fear like a stop sign. They see it as evidence that growth is nearby. Every meaningful opportunity comes wrapped in uncertainty. Every transformation begins with discomfort. If you're waiting to feel fearless before moving forward, you'll spend your entire life standing at the starting line while others build the future you secretly wanted. Your hidden power also reveals itself through responsibility. The day you stop blaming circumstances, difficult people, or bad luck for everything happening in your life, something shifts. You reclaim control. Even when life isn't fair, your response still belongs to you. That realization is one of the most empowering discoveries a person can make. You cannot always control what happens, but you can always decide who you become because of it. That decision shapes your identity more than any obstacle ever could. There will always be people who underestimate you because they only judge what they can immediately see. They mistake quietness for weakness. They confuse patience with passivity. They assume kindness means you lack strength. Let them believe it. Hidden power doesn't need constant recognition. Mountains don't announce their height. Oceans don't explain their depth. The strongest presence in any room is often the person who has nothing to prove because they already know exactly who they are. Have you ever noticed how certain people react to you in ways that seem completely out of proportion? You haven't said anything extraordinary. You haven't tried to compete with them. You haven't demanded attention. Yet they become defensive, dismissive, or strangely uncomfortable around you. At first, you may assume you've done something wrong. You might even shrink yourself to make them feel at ease. But what if their reaction has very little to do with your actions and everything to do with the potential they sense within you? Human beings are incredibly perceptive, even when they don't realize it. Long before someone can explain why they feel drawn to or intimidated by another person, their instincts have already formed an opinion. They notice your resilience, your ability to recover after setbacks, your willingness to think independently, or the quiet confidence hidden beneath your uncertainty. Ironically, they may recognize these qualities before you ever do. While you're busy focusing on your flaws, they're paying attention to your strengths. This creates a strange contradiction. The person who doubts themselves the most is sometimes the very person others quietly watch. Not because you're perfect, not because you're famous, but because potential has a presence. It doesn't need expensive clothes, impressive titles, or endless achievements to make itself known. It reveals itself through consistency, determination, curiosity, and the refusal to stay defeated. Even when your confidence is low, your actions often speak louder than your inner doubts. People rarely admit they're intimidated by someone's potential. Instead, it shows up in subtle ways. They minimize your accomplishments by calling them luck. They question your decisions even when they're working. They offer advice you never ask for because they feel uncomfortable seeing you trust your own judgment. Sometimes they'll remind you of your past mistakes, as if those mistakes define your future. These behaviors aren't always intentional acts of cruelty. Often they're unconscious attempts to protect their own self-image. Think about what happens when someone begins changing for the better. Maybe they start pursuing their dreams, improving their health, learning new skills, or setting stronger boundaries. The people who truly care about them often celebrate that growth, but others react differently. They become distant. They make sarcastic comments. They accuse the person of changing too much. Why? Because your growth forces them to confront the gap between who they are and who they could become. It's easier to criticize your progress than to question their own lack of action. The most surprising part is that you may completely overlook the qualities others admire. You're too close to your own journey. Every challenge feels normal because you lived through it. Every sacrifice becomes invisible because it became part of your routine. You remember every moment you almost quit, every failure, every embarrassing mistake. Others don't carry that internal record. They simply see someone who keeps moving forward despite obstacles. That's why people often underestimate themselves while overestimating everyone else. Potential isn't measured by where you currently stand. It's measured by the direction you're moving. A seed doesn't resemble the tree it will become, yet everything necessary already exists inside it. The same is true for you. Your future abilities aren't separate from your present identity. They're waiting to be developed through repeated action, discipline, and experience. The people observing your journey may recognize the trajectory before you recognize it yourself. This is why comparison becomes so dangerous. When you constantly compare your beginning to someone else's success, you become blind to your own progress. You stop noticing how much you've grown because your attention is fixed on someone else's destination. Meanwhile, those around you may be looking at your life, wishing they possessed your determination, your creativity, your courage, or your resilience. Everyone sees something different because everyone is fighting battles that remain invisible to others. There will also be people who attempt to convince you that you're ordinary because your potential makes them uncomfortable. If they can persuade you to doubt yourself, they never have to face the possibility that you might surpass the limitations they've accepted for themselves. This doesn't mean everyone who criticizes you is jealous. Sometimes criticism is valuable, sometimes it's necessary. Wisdom comes from learning the difference between feedback that helps you improve and negativity designed to keep you standing still. As you become more aware of your own abilities, something remarkable begins to happen. You stop seeking constant reassurance from other people. You no longer need everyone to believe in your vision because your belief becomes enough to keep you moving. The opinions that once controlled your emotions gradually lose their influence. You understand that not everyone is supposed to understand your path. Some people only recognize greatness after it becomes impossible to deny. The irony is that the day you finally see your own potential is often the day other people's opinions become far less important. You stop performing for approval. You stop explaining every decision. You stop asking permission to become who you were always capable of becoming. Instead of trying to convince the world that you're powerful, you quietly invest your energy into proving it through consistent action, knowing that genuine strength never depends on applause to confirm its existence. There comes a moment in every person's life when they grow exhausted from chasing approval. It doesn't happen overnight. It happens after countless disappointments, after bending over backward for people who never appreciated the effort, after explaining yourself to those determined to misunderstand you, and after sacrificing pieces of your identity just to fit into places that were never meant for you. One day, something quietly changes. You realize you've been living according to expectations that were never truly your own. That realization becomes the beginning of real freedom. Validation is one of the most addictive things in the world because it feels rewarding in the moment. A compliment boosts your confidence. Praise makes you feel accepted. Recognition creates a temporary sense of importance. None of these things are inherently bad. The problem begins when your entire identity depends on receiving them. The moment someone disapproves of you, your confidence collapses. A single criticism outweighs 10 compliments. Your mood becomes controlled by opinions that change as quickly as the weather. Many people spend years trying to become someone everyone will like. They soften their opinions, hide their ambitions, laugh at jokes they don't find funny, and say yes when every part of them wants to say no. They become experts at reading the room, but strangers to themselves. Every decision is filtered through one exhausting question: what will people think? That question slowly drains the life out of authentic living because it places your happiness in the hands of people who aren't responsible for carrying it. The difficult truth is that no matter how kind, talented, generous, or successful you become, someone will misunderstand you. Someone will criticize you. Someone will decide they don't like you for reasons that have nothing to do with reality. If your peace depends on universal approval, you'll spend your entire life chasing something that has never existed. Even history's greatest leaders, artists, thinkers, and visionaries were doubted, mocked, and rejected by countless people during their lifetimes. Criticism is not proof that you're failing. Often, it's proof that you're visible. The turning point arrives when you stop asking permission to exist as your authentic self. Instead of constantly explaining your choices, you allow your actions to speak for themselves. Instead of defending every decision, you become comfortable letting people misunderstand you. That doesn't mean becoming rude or disrespectful. It means understanding that your value isn't determined by whether everyone agrees with your path. One of the greatest sources of emotional exhaustion comes from trying to manage other people's perceptions. You replay conversations in your head, wondering if you said the wrong thing. You overthink text messages before sending them. You apologize for taking up space. You feel guilty for setting boundaries because someone might become upset. But here's the reality: no matter how carefully you manage your image, people will still interpret you through the lens of their own experiences, insecurities, and beliefs. You cannot control their perspective, only your character. As you begin releasing the need for validation, something remarkable happens. Decisions become clearer. You stop wasting energy trying to impress people who were never interested in supporting your growth. You focus less on looking successful and more on becoming capable. Your attention shifts from appearances to substance. Instead of asking, "How do I make people admire me?" you begin asking, "How do I become someone I genuinely respect?" This shift also changes your relationships. The people who only valued the version of you that constantly sought approval may become uncomfortable. They were accustomed to your endless availability, your willingness to please, and your habit of putting their needs ahead of your own. When you begin establishing healthy boundaries, they may accuse you of changing. In a sense, they're right, you have changed. You've stopped abandoning yourself to make everyone else comfortable. True confidence is surprisingly quiet. It doesn't need to announce itself or demand attention. It doesn't constantly seek reassurance because it no longer depends on outside applause. Confident people still appreciate compliments, but they don't require them to feel worthy. They accept criticism without allowing it to define them. They celebrate success without making it their entire identity. Their foundation comes from knowing who they are rather than constantly asking others to tell them. You'll also discover that releasing the need for validation makes you more courageous. Suddenly, you're willing to try things you once avoided because failure no longer feels like public humiliation. You're willing to speak honestly because disagreement no longer terrifies you. You're willing to pursue meaningful goals because your motivation comes from purpose instead of applause. Every step becomes lighter because you're no longer carrying the impossible burden of pleasing everyone around you. The irony is that people often respect you more once you stop desperately trying to earn their approval. Authenticity has a quiet magnetism. Individuals who know their values, honor their boundaries, and remain true to themselves naturally command attention without chasing it. They don't waste time proving their worth because they've already accepted it internally. And once that inner acceptance becomes stronger than the opinions surrounding you, no amount of praise can inflate your ego, and no amount of criticism can diminish the strength you've finally learned to recognize within yourself. There is a strange kind of strength that most people completely overlook. It isn't loud. It doesn't need to dominate every conversation or announce every achievement. It doesn't rush to prove a point or win every argument. Instead, it watches, listens, and understands while everyone else is competing to be heard. True power often remains silent. That silence is not weakness. It is discipline. It is emotional control. It is the confidence of someone who knows their value doesn't decrease simply because they refuse to explain it to everyone. Many people mistake silence for fear because they assume the loudest person is the strongest. Society rewards those who constantly speak, constantly react, and constantly seek attention. But if you Pay close attention to the people who possess genuine influence. You'll notice something different. They choose their words carefully. They don't respond to every insult. They don't defend themselves against every accusation. They understand that not every battle deserves their energy. Sometimes the strongest response is no response at all. Think about how much energy people waste trying to correct every misunderstanding. Someone spreads a rumor and they immediately panic. Someone question their intentions and they rush to explain themselves. Someone criticizes their choices and they spend hours trying to change that person's mind. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Many people have already decided what they want to believe. No explanation will satisfy someone who is committed to misunderstanding you. Every extra word simply gives them more material to twist. Silence changes the balance of power because it removes something people expect. When someone is trying to provoke you, they are hoping for a reaction. They want anger, frustration, or desperation. They want proof that they can influence your emotions. The moment you refuse to hand them that power, their strategy begins to fail. Your calm becomes unsettling because it reminds them they cannot control your inner world. Emotional discipline is one of the rarest forms of strength in a world addicted to immediate reactions. This doesn't mean staying silent out of fear or suppressing your voice forever. There are moments when speaking is necessary. There are times when injustice must be confronted, boundaries must be established, and truth must be defended. Wisdom lies in knowing the difference between responding with purpose and reacting from emotion. One creates respect, the other creates regret. Consider how often people reveal themselves if you simply allow them to keep talking. When you're constantly interrupting, defending yourself, or trying to control every conversation, you miss valuable information. Silence gives you the ability to observe patterns instead of isolated moments. You begin noticing inconsistencies between what people say and what they repeatedly do. You recognize hidden motives that would have remained invisible if you had been too busy trying to prove your own point. Observation often provides more power than endless conversation. There is another reason silence becomes such a powerful tool. It protects your focus. Every unnecessary argument steals time you could have invested in becoming stronger. Every online debate, every pointless conflict, every attempt to convince someone who refuses to listen drains mental energy that could have been used to build your future. Successful people understand that attention is one of their most valuable resources. They guard it carefully because whatever receives your attention eventually shapes your life. Silence also creates mystery. People naturally become curious about those who don't constantly reveal every thought, every plan, or every ambition. In today's world, many feel pressure to announce every goal before they've even taken the first step. They seek validation through declarations rather than results. But there is incredible strength in working quietly while others remain unaware of your progress. When success finally arrives, it speaks with far greater authority than promises ever could. Learning to remain calm under pressure is another form of silent power. Anyone can appear confident when life is easy. Real character is revealed during conflict, uncertainty, and disappointment. When everyone else is panicking, the person who remains composed becomes the natural source of stability. Calmness is contagious, so is chaos. The emotional state you choose doesn't only affect you, it influences everyone around you. Silence also teaches patience. Modern life encourages instant gratification, immediate replies, instant opinions, constant updates. But meaningful growth rarely happens at that speed. Mastery requires repetition, wisdom requires reflection, transformation requires time. When you become comfortable with silence, you also become comfortable with the slow process of becoming someone stronger than you were yesterday. Perhaps the greatest gift silence offers is self-awareness. When the noise of constant validation, endless opinions, and outside distractions fades, you begin hearing your own thoughts more clearly. You discover what truly matters to you instead of living according to everyone else's expectations. You become less reactive because your identity is no longer built upon every passing comment or temporary emotion. Eventually, you'll notice something remarkable. The less you feel the need to prove yourself, the more confident you become. The less you argue, the more peaceful your life feels. The less you chase attention, the more your actions begin attracting genuine respect. Strength was never about having the loudest voice in the room. It has always belonged to the person who can remain steady, focused, and unshaken, while the rest of the world loses control around them. The greatest prison most people will ever experience has no walls, no locked doors, and no visible guards. It exists entirely within the mind. It's built from years of self-doubt, fear, limiting beliefs, and invisible expectations placed upon you by others. You wake up inside this prison every day without realizing it because you've lived there for so long that it feels normal. The bars aren't made of iron, they're made of thoughts like, I'm not good enough, I'm too late, what if I fail? And people like me don't succeed. The tragedy isn't that these thoughts appear. The tragedy is believing they are the truth. Every person begins life with curiosity, imagination, and the desire to explore. As children, we rarely question whether we're capable of learning something new. We fall, get back up, and try again without overthinking the process. But somewhere along the way, life introduces criticism, rejection, disappointment, and comparison. A failed attempt becomes proof that you're incapable. A harsh opinion becomes part of your identity. One embarrassing moment turns into a lifelong fear of trying again. Gradually, you stop seeing yourself through your own eyes and begin seeing yourself through the judgments of others. The most dangerous thing about invisible chains is that they don't feel like chains anymore. They disguise themselves as logic. They whisper that you're simply being realistic. They convince you that lowering your expectations is maturity. They tell you that staying where you are is the safest decision. But comfort and growth have never lived in the same place for very long. Every meaningful transformation requires leaving behind a version of yourself that once felt familiar. One of the strongest chains is the belief that your past determines your future. Many people carry old failures like permanent labels. They introduce themselves to the world through their mistakes instead of their potential. They say, I failed once, so I'll probably fail again. But failure is an event, not an identity. It is feedback, not a life sentence. Every successful person you admire has accumulated disappointments that could have convinced them to quit. The difference is that they refuse to let temporary setbacks become permanent definitions. Another invisible chain comes from comparison. In today's world, you're constantly surrounded by carefully edited versions of other people's lives. You see their victories without witnessing their struggles. You compare your behind-the-scenes reality to someone else's highlight reel and conclude that you're falling behind. But comparison steals your ability to recognize your own progress. Every minute spent wishing you had someone else's journey is a minute stolen from building your own. Then there is the chain of people pleasing. It quietly convinces you that your value depends on making everyone else comfortable. You apologize for setting boundaries. You ignore your own needs to avoid disappointing others. You say yes when your heart is screaming no. At first, this behavior feels kind and generous. Eventually, it becomes exhausting. You realize you've spent so much energy earning acceptance that you've forgotten how to accept yourself. Freedom begins the moment you understand that disappointing others is sometimes the unavoidable cost of staying true to your own values. Fear of failure is another invisible prison that keeps countless dreams trapped forever. Many people believe they need certainty before taking action. They wait until they're completely confident, fully prepared, and guaranteed success. That day never arrives. Growth has never required certainty. It requires courage. Confidence is not something you collect before you begin. It is something you build every time you act despite uncertainty. Every step forward weakens the chains. that once convinced you to remain still. Breaking free also requires accepting responsibility for your future. This doesn't mean blaming yourself for everything that has happened. Life is often unfair. Circumstances beyond your control will challenge you. People will disappoint you. Opportunities may be taken away. But while you cannot control every event, you always retain the ability to choose your response. The moment you stop waiting for someone else to rescue you, permission is no longer required. You become the author of your next chapter instead of a victim of your previous one. You'll notice that as these invisible chains begin to break, your entire perspective changes. Problems that once seemed overwhelming become challenges to solve. Criticism loses much of its power because it no longer defines your identity. You stop asking, "Can I do this?" and begin asking, "What can I learn if I try?" That simple shift transforms fear into curiosity and obstacles into opportunities for growth. Some people around you may not understand this transformation. They became comfortable with the version of you that doubted yourself. They knew how to predict your choices because fear made you predictable. But once you stop seeking permission, stop apologizing for your ambition, and stop allowing old beliefs to dictate your future, everything changes. You begin making decisions from possibility instead of limitation. You realize that the chains holding you back were never stronger than your potential. They only appeared powerful because you spent so many years believing they could never be broken. There is a moment when everything you've been learning finally comes together. It isn't marked by applause, recognition, or a dramatic announcement. In fact, most people won't even notice it at first. The real transformation happens internally. One day, you wake up and realize you no longer think like the person who used to doubt every decision, fear every opinion, or shrink every dream to make others comfortable. The battle that once consumed your mind becomes strangely quiet, not because life suddenly becomes easy, but because you've become stronger than the challenges trying to stop you. Becoming a force to be reckoned with has very little to do with physical strength, popularity, or power over other people. Those things are temporary. Titles can be taken away, fame fades, money comes and goes. But a person who has mastered themselves carries something far more valuable. They possess discipline when motivation disappears. They remain calm when others panic. They continue moving forward when circumstances become uncomfortable. That kind of strength cannot be borrowed, purchased, or stolen because it is built through countless invisible choices made over time. Most people are waiting for a single life-changing moment. They believe success arrives all at once, as though one opportunity, one conversation, or one lucky break will suddenly transform everything. Reality works differently. Extraordinary lives are built through ordinary decisions repeated consistently. Every morning you choose discipline over excuses. Every time you refuse to quit after disappointment. Every moment you remain committed despite slow progress. You are quietly becoming someone entirely different. Transformation rarely announces itself while it's happening. You only recognize it after looking back at the person you used to be. There will always be distractions, attempting to pull you away from your purpose. Some come disguised as comfort. Others appear as endless entertainment, unnecessary conflict, or the constant desire to compare yourself with everyone else. These distractions don't usually destroy your future overnight. Instead, they slowly steal your focus one day at a time. That's why powerful people become protective of their attention. They understand that where attention goes, energy follows, and where energy flows, results eventually appear. Another sign that you've become stronger is your relationship with setbacks. In the past, obstacles felt like evidence that you weren't capable. Every failure seemed personal. Every rejection felt permanent. But now challenges become teachers rather than enemies. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and begin asking, "What is this trying to teach me?" That single change in perspective turns painful experiences into opportunities for growth instead of reasons to surrender. As your confidence grows, You'll also notice a surprising shift in your relationships. Some people will naturally drift away, not because you've become arrogant, but because you've stopped participating in patterns that once kept both of you comfortable. You no longer tolerate constant negativity. You no longer chase one-sided relationships. You no longer sacrifice your peace simply to avoid disappointing someone else. This may feel lonely for a while, but loneliness created by growth is far healthier than company built upon pretending to be someone you're not. One of the greatest misconceptions about becoming powerful is the belief that you'll eventually stop feeling fear. Fear doesn't disappear. It simply loses its authority. You still experience uncertainty before taking big steps. You still face moments where doubt whispers in your ear. The difference is that those emotions no longer make your decisions for you. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing your purpose over your comfort again and again until bravery becomes part of your character. People will eventually notice the changes, even if they can't explain them. They'll wonder why criticism no longer affects you the way it once did. They'll notice that you speak with greater certainty and carry yourself with quiet confidence. They'll see that you no longer seek validation before making decisions. Some will admire your growth. Others may resent it because your transformation reminds them of possibilities they've ignored within themselves. Their reactions are not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to remain faithful to the person you're becoming. Never confuse confidence with arrogance. Arrogance constantly demands attention because it secretly fears being ignored. Genuine confidence remains humble because it no longer depends on proving anything. Truly powerful individuals don't waste time announcing how strong they are. They let their consistency, integrity, and actions communicate everything that words never could. They understand that respect is earned through behavior repeated over time, not through declarations made in moments of excitement. The journey doesn't end when you become stronger. Growth has no finish line. Every new level of success introduces new lessons, new responsibilities, and new opportunities to evolve. The person you become tomorrow should continue inspiring the person you are today. That's the beauty of personal development. There is always another mindset to strengthen, another skill to master, another fear to overcome, and another version of yourself waiting to emerge. Perhaps the most powerful realization of all is understanding that everything you once searched for outside yourself had been developing quietly within you all along. The resilience that carried you through difficult seasons, the wisdom gained from painful experiences, the discipline built through repeated effort, and the courage discovered in moments of uncertainty were never accidents. They were preparing you for a life where you no longer needed permission to believe in yourself. Once you fully embrace that truth, you stop waiting for the world to recognize your strength, because you already know that the greatest force you'll ever become is the person who has completely mastered their own mind.